and take time to look at it through other people's eyes. Take some time and reflect on what you believe in your soul, 'cause that is the key to life. You gotta let the negativity go.
Hello and welcome back to the What the Fox podcast with your hosts, Lindsey Fox and Amber Ross. We are going to touch on a different societal norm today, one that is relevant to my story and Lindsey's as well, and probably many of yours. But Definitely. It's the idea, right? Yes, that's why it's a societal norm, Amber, right? We just like hold space for my brain sometimes. Okay.
Oh,
today's topic. It wouldn't be a norm if it wasn't relevant. Anywho, today we're talking about work and the idea that we are here to work, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, whatever your schedule is, and then absolutely live for the weekend. And the only time we get to have fun is Saturday and Sunday, which, in my opinion, is utter bullshit.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, we work to live. That's exactly what we are trained to do in the U.S.
Yeah. And it
work to live.
No, thank you, sir, ma'am. The idea that you cannot, one, enjoy the work that you do, and two, weave in passion projects throughout the week or things that bring you joy or things that spark fun in your life is obnoxious to me, quite frankly.
I would agree with that 110%.
At some point, you're going to disagree with me on this podcast, Lindsey.
Oh,
I'll make it happen.
I think that we have already. I think that we have, but in a nice, fair way. I think that we both offer unique perspectives. But I agree with you on this completely because, I know that I absolutely have a tendency of being a complete and total workaholic, but it's also because my environment has fostered not only a need for that, but it's also something I've had the ability to accommodate based on the high need in the last couple of years of this pandemic. But
so full stop.
Yep.
Full stop. Tell me how your environment has created that for you.
Okay, sure. Well, for starters, I now live alone. I'm no longer living in my marriage home with my husband. So living alone has offered me more time and space that I did not have previously because I was assuming the role of a caretaker and wife at that time. So I would say my environment in terms of that, because of the pandemic, everything went remote. So it was very challenging in terms of honoring confidentiality for my clients, in terms of managing that time and space around the house with my then husband of when I could do all the things. Whereas now I have a lot more flexibility of operating on my schedule, on my time, and when my clients can fit into that or what have you. So in that sense, I know you hate work-life balance talk, which we'll get to today, but I think it offered me a solid.
I'm cringing already. I'm cringing already, Lindsey.
See, we can disagree on that. But I do. So that did offer a sense of work-life balance because I started to create my own schedule and I set the parameters of, this is when I'm free. And then telling my clients, when can you fit into these parameters? And it actually helped me maximize productivity. In addition, because of the pandemic, I'm not driving from home to home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that. When you said it, I saw a different version of that, which was the direct opposite of what you just shared. So I'm glad that you expounded a little bit.
Oh, okay. Because I'm thinking, envisioning?
So when you said your environment created this, you tied it with the being a workaholic and all of that together for me painted a picture of pandemic life making less work-life balance. I'm going to use the term for the purpose of this moment.
No, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay. Wait, let me add in a little bit of context. It was out of freaking control at the beginning of the pandemic. It was absolutely horrific. Yes. It was awful. I experienced a tremendous level of just sheer exhaustion and burnout within the first year of this pandemic. It was also emotionally exhausting because I had just left my husband. There was a lot of other stuff I was carrying at that time, but Yes, all of the kiddos were going into crisis and, entering partial hospitalization programs
Mm-hmm.
or, having suicidal thoughts. So, yes, I was absolutely in a workaholic mode. And when it came to a point of where I was like, this is not healthy. I'm working
Mm-hmm.
7 days a week. I need to revise this. How can I kind of shift what I'm doing to make this sustainable because this pandemic is going to be lasting a long ass time. And so I pivoted,
What
and that is
caused,
where
oh, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that's just that's what kind of shifted things for me is saying like, okay, this is not sustainable. I cannot keep operating under these conditions in the way that I have been. What do I need to do differently?
Absolutely. You went into crisis mode. You put your client's needs ahead of your own because that was what needed to happen in that moment, in that time, in that space. What was the moment or like when your brain said, oop, like here's a wall. I have to pivot. This is not sustainable. Something's got to flip. Like, what happened? Because I'm actually really intrigued.
Well, I think again, because there's so many different conditions involved,
Mm,
it's a unique response that's not one size fits all in the sense that I recognized I'm getting burnt out from my job and there's no space for me. And I know
mm,
that in terms of, I know I talked about this during our Valentine's Day episode on February 15th, which is I needed to do the work. I needed to
yep.
do some like really deep emotional work and labor of my own because I was going through a divorce and needed to do my own emotional processing. And the fact that I was working 7 days a week, frankly, what felt like against my will, because ethically, like you had a lot
Yeah.
of major, huge shit going on with minors and children that I can't turn a blind eye to that.
Mm-mm.
Um, Especially when everyone's world had just gotten turned upside down at the same time. And so for me, it was like, okay, I've got most of my caseload stabilized right now. It's time for me to pivot and create space for me to do my work. And so that for me was kind of the catalyst of like I'm burning myself on both ends, so
Yep.
I need to figure out what works. Like how can I make this sustainable for me to still have an income and do my job, but also do the work that's necessary so that I can become the best version of myself and um, be happy with where I am in life and this transition that's taking place.
Yeah. I think that's really important to be the self awareness, to see the burnout coming, recognize it. I know you and I've talked about this before, like calling out that feeling, giving it a name so that you can kind of take that control over that situation and pivot. Because, yeah, while society says that it's noble to prioritize work and to over index on career success, that's not necessarily healthy to your emotional success, your mental health, your like that spark inside of us is
Yeah.
not, it's not necessarily lit from working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
That's right. I actually was just talking to a coaching client about this today. And it was because we were just talking about how, and she works for a high level corporation. And we were just talking about how a sense of human connection gets lost when you work for a big corporation, and the sense of whether you need to connect with HR about something, or you're just meeting with your boss or a team of board members or whatever it is. And I have worked in a corporate environment, and I understand I understood what she meant and what she'd been talking to. I could empathize with her situation. But one thing I was reflecting on is how during this pandemic, I believe it has, for better or for worse, it has reignited a sense of human connection in the sense that in the last 2 years, everyone worldwide has experienced some level
Mm,
of loss, whether that be a perceived loss of freedoms and rights whenever you get into the face masks and vaccine mandates, or if it's an actual loss of a loved one or someone you know to COVID, whether it's a loss of your job, of your identity, because maybe now you're a mom and you're working from home, or you had babies during the pandemic and all you know is this really stressful and anxiety producing life at home with your infants or whatever. So we were just talking about the fact that corporations, at least from what I've seen, there's definitely been just a slight shift in their awareness about the human connection and the importance of honoring that. That was definitely not as present pre-pandemic. So in
I would
terms of
agree with
like,
that.
you know what I mean? I mean, you work for a corporate, an unnamed corporation.
I was just thinking back to my experience. Obviously, I work for a large corporation, and when you said that, it kind of made me smile and giggle a little bit, because I can remember meetings prior to the pandemic, and at the start of the meeting, you just launch into meeting topics. There's no human connection. There's no like,
no checking in.
No checking in, no, like so many people I worked with, I had no idea any information about their family situation, their home life. And now, more often than not, there's space at the start of meetings to actually check in on one another and ask, how are you? And hold space for that answer. And it's been a welcome change for me, because I worked from an office 45 minutes from my house, 4 to 5 days a week prior to the pandemic. And the people I sat beside, I didn't know very well. I knew a few of them and I knew their stories. It was,
isn't that like,
it was normal.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, I'm using air quotes for those who can't see, like it was normal. But now I know more about people. I've seen, where a lot of the conferences we do are video and face. So like I see their children run by, I see pets, and I feel more connected now than I did then. And I'm further removed from the actual like face-to-face interaction piece. So absolutely get that.
Yes. And honestly, I feel that my clients, therapy clients more specifically, feel more connected to me now during the pandemic in some ways. I know that sounds very ironic, because before I'd either be in their home or I would see them one-on-one in the office. But because, it's very rare to see your clinician's background of like, like I've had a lot of my clients meet Lulu, like the kiddos love seeing her on camera. And so we'll incorporate Lulu. But things like that, you just wouldn't get to know that side of a person otherwise. And likewise, even in our world, it was very, very rare for us to, the clinicians, at least in staff meetings, we would talk or process out and get feedback around how to handle certain cases. It was less about like, what are we doing? What is our self-care? How did we spend our weekend? Or tell us one positive thing that happened when and so during the pandemic, they actually started to incorporate like staff contest. And so every month, like someone would win like $100 or something for, who carved the best pumpkin for Halloween, or
that's a lot of fun.
Like just who, little things like that. So we could post it on like a private internal thing that we have going on. And so I do think there's been a little bit of a shift that's taken place over time, but I do agree that in terms of in general, and what in both of our, I would say in everyone's line of work, frankly, people are still hyper focused on productivity, the revenue that you're bringing in, especially now, provided that supply chain issues are horrendous.
Yes.
And so it's created a lot of other pressure in different areas, but I think more people are cognizant of the fact that we need support. We need that human connection, and to be able to offer a shoulder to lean on.
Absolutely. And the human piece of it, I think back so often, I was a key presenter on a topic, or, I was in the spotlight trying to talk through a sales pitch, or in, working through the development of new offer, and everything had to be perfect. There couldn't be any background noise. There couldn't be any distractions. There couldn't be any like, you could not be human, and not like disparaging the company I work for in any way. It was just like a level of quote unquote professionalism that if you were prepared, things would go a certain way. And I think the pandemic showed us like no amount of preparation can determine an outcome 100% of the time. Right.
That's right.
But at the start, when everybody came home, I think folks were still trying to have that air of quote unquote professionalism or perfectionism, I'm going to call it. And like make sure there were no noises in the background, make sure that there were no distractions, make sure that, you know, you were in a quiet space. And then
Right.
now it's commonplace to log on to a meeting and someone's child is doing violin lessons in the background. You know,
Right.
somebody's got a baby that's eating lunch and you can hear the sounds. Somebody's got a dog barking. Like these are all just normal and we ignore them because we all realize that that's freaking life. Like it's not going to be quiet. That's not real 100% of the time. And for me, that's brought a whole new level of job satisfaction to my life because I could set down that pressure of everything needing to look a certain way and for everything needing to be a certain way. I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
I can show up and like we'll manage the situation the way it needs to be managed in the moment. It's not like if the dog barks, it's not the end of the world.
No, girl. No, there's
Because
no
like
way I could have
Stella's gonna
survived.
bark. She's gonna make herself known.
No, there's no way I could have survived this entire pandemic if I had to be that rigid. I honestly, same with like, you think about different jobs where you used to have to wear like business casual or even a suit every day. So even now, a lot of those workplaces have shifted. And when you look at companies like Google and Facebook or what have you, I mean, you can see that the workplace and what the workplace looks like is changing in the sense that
Absolutely.
when you are comfortable, you're going to be more productive or more willingness to, you know, in terms of that employee retention you're talking about. So that comfort is important, but so is having a life outside of work. And I think that's the other part of this
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah. So tell me, I know, so you believe in work-life balance. That is kind of what you've crafted for yourself with the projects you work on throughout the week. I'd like for you to share a little bit about what work-life balance means to you and kind of how you've brought that in.
Oh, well, I'm still working on it, Amber.
I didn't say you had it perfectly figured out, but you've made progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Progress, not perfection, for
Yes,
sure. And so
100%.
yeah, so it's like what I had just mentioned previously about the creating really firm boundaries with my clients about when I'm available, when I'm not available. Um, for me to kind of set aside as well. Amber's holding up a sign that says progress, not perfection for me. Thank you.
I knew I had it in here.
Yes. So yes, it's for me, it's just come in the form of boundary setting. There was, like I said, I was a bit more lax during the first year of the pandemic. Lax by that I mean with my boundaries with clients in the sense
Yeah.
that, you know, if there were more no-shows, if there was a need for an extra session in the week or two extra sessions for a family, I would make it work. I just made it work because everyone was struggling. Um, but as time went on, it's still like, you know, as like healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, whatever, like everyone needs to have some kind of limit of
Yes.
what they can put out. You have to refuel things. And so for me, I don't even know if I would label it as work-life balance so much as there were boundaries that were put into place that did contribute to that balance, but also with that time that it created, and as I continue to grow and evolve through my own self-care and emotional needs and fulfilling my own, like filling my own cup, um, I was then also creating time, space, and energy to allow my creative flow to take place. And that energized me and it allowed me
Yeah.
to be a better person to the people in my life, but also to my clients, because then I was able to kind of connect with a piece of my identity that I put on the back burner for so long. And so I think that also, whenever I think of work-life balance, this is the part of my life that I had been missing out on in the first year of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So whether it be like launching this podcast, launching the coaching business, um, working on the children's book series, just all those little things have really given me like a spark. It's been very rejuvenating for me because it feels more close to what my life purpose is. Whereas in the Like in the coaching realm, I work with very action oriented and motivated clients. That's really exciting for me. I
Yes.
enjoy, right? I mean, you work
Yeah.
with, right. So it's like very exciting to work with people who are like, yes, I want to do the work and I'm ready to do the work. Um, and it's just a very different flair than what you engage in typically in the therapeutic context, at least.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a really important point. Folks who are in caregiver type roles in the pandemic did what they naturally do. They put others' needs ahead of their own
Hmm.
and took up all of the extra space that existed in their lives to make sure the folks around them and the folks who needed them had what they needed.
Hmm.
And you, what it sounds like, and what I'm hearing you say is you then created space in your life to actually live authentically, which is like, that's important and it's key and it's part of the human experience. And it's one that society as a whole doesn't necessarily reward, quote unquote, like they do over indexing on career or helping other people or putting other people's needs first, which there's
Yeah.
space and there's importance for all of it. But it's rewarding and it's necessary to create that self-care time, that time to like relight your spark so that you can show up for other people.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely. And likewise, like even within that scheduling piece that I was talking about, I do not take appointments after 5:30. I no longer
yeah,
do any appointments after 5:30, and I'm very rigid about what days are for coaching, what days are for therapy. I also will make a point to at least whenever I'm not being a caregiver to my special needs dog, I will make time to go on a walk.
yeah,
Anytime that I can get outside or just have that self-care time, whether it be maybe I don't have a session in the morning, I'll go in the morning. If I don't have a session in the afternoon, I'll go in the afternoon. But I definitely have committed to myself, like that's something I want to do every day. That's something I want to get outside and have fresh air, or I don't care how cold it is. I'm going to get outside
yeah.
and just get away from my screen for a period of time without any devices involved.
Absolutely. And that's something I talk to my coaching clients about too, because, excuse me, um, you have to fill your cup first in order to fill the cups around you, right? If you
Mhm.
just keep filling out of your vessel, like if we picture a cup of water or a flower vase, whatever works for your brain, eventually it will empty if you're spending
Mhm.
all of your time filling everyone else's and never refilling your own. So
Yes.
it's what I love about what you just shared is that you didn't make it to where it had to be 10 a.m. every day. I'm going to do self care.
No, girl, because I
It's
don't do the planner thing.
no. And like, I love that because you've made it work for you. It's okay.
Yeah.
I have a pocket of time right now. I'm going to choose to use this time to go for a walk. I'm going to choose to use this time to invest in the podcast, or invest in creating the book
Meal
or
plan.
whatever it
Yes,
is.
whatever it is. Yeah, that's the other thing
Yeah.
is that cooking became a huge part for me during the pandemic. Is just
Yes.
being able to, I mean, I have a whole other Instagram account, guys, if you guys are interested in seeing all my food
It
porn.
makes me hungry every time I look at it.
But that account is actually Fox Fixins, Foxfixins. And that was something that in my marriage, I really didn't get the opportunity to cook the way that I want to cook for the foods that I want because you're
Yeah.
feeding two people and we had very different choices, or we had different preferences.
No
Um,
way. Can't imagine.
Oh, yes. So as soon as I had my freedom to do whatever the fuck I wanted, you better believe I ended up making all the foods that I could just have for me, and it was fabulous. And I got very much on a kick on about doing this anytime that I could during the pandemic, and that was something that just for me it offers it's like a source of relaxation and just
Yeah.
enjoyment. You just kind of tune out, you throw things in a pot or a skillet or on the grill and just sort of enjoy it, and just I have loved that. That's been a huge thing that I've picked up on for sure, that has been a part of that quote unquote work life balance.
It's still not balanced, but I'll give it
Well,
to
so yeah,
you.
let's talk about that. Tell
So
me why. So I know that we do have like maybe it's a semantics thing, maybe it's
it
like the
is.
fact
It
that I call it
100%
that.
is.
So I want to hear more about why you're so opposed to this idea of work-life balance and the meaning of work-life balance.
Okay, so it's semantics 100% because what you're saying I believe in, but the thought of work-life balance, the word balance is what causes me a problem
Is it
because
the idea of 50-50?
yes, because the idea that society, like if you look up the word balance in the dictionary,
Right.
like I have pictures of an actual balance where things are equal
Sure.
and they're the same on both sides. And I just don't think, go ahead.
I was thinking of like yin and yang, that
Yeah,
it's like equal parts. Sure.
that's not reality and it's not realistic. And what was explained to me, and this was actually in a seminar that I was a part of many years ago, pre-kids, pre-K, or pre-H in my case, was
I'm
that
trying to
it's
understand what's the H, Amber.
Hazel, pre-Hazel.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to know where your brain went. We'll talk about that another time. I do want to know, but not right now. Anyway, a gentleman said to me, work-life balance is a myth. What you should strive for or what you should look for is work-life tension. And it's the tension between those opposing sides and always remembering that each one has value and that while they may not be equal on any given day, that they're both getting attention. And this week it may look like, the majority of your attention went to work. And then next week, the majority of your attention could go to passion projects. And then the next week, it could be self-care. So when you like zoom out on the overarching theme of a month, all things are likely equal, but they're never really balanced in a given day or in a given time period. So it's semantics 100%. But like when you say work-life balance, I get these pictures in my head of like everything being equal and everything being like the same.
Although,
and it just,
I will say, it sounds like you are saying it would be balanced over the course of a month, for instance, when you reflect on the time, it sounds like it would be equal parts. It's just, I think it is a semantics thing because honestly, what you're describing is kind of how I think about how relationships operate. I mean, I know I'm taking like a rabbit hole turn over here, but it's like, but it is kind of a similar idea where it's like, someone described to me that marriage specifically. This was probably back in like 2015 or so. I remember a clinical supervisor I had. We were talking about a case, and she said, marriage is about whether or not each spouse is falling in love with each other at the same time because they're constantly falling in love with each other over and over and over again. It's just a matter of whether or not they're doing it at the same time. I was like, wow, that is very interesting because she was basically saying like some days shit's on the rocks. Other days it's not. It's a matter of like when you guys are in alignment and y'all are on the same page at the same time, that's a beautiful thing. Enjoy it when you can, and whenever you can't, hope that there's less of that and more of the other. That tension,
and
like what you're saying.
Yeah. And it is like the tension for me, and I think the way he spun it, I didn't do a good job of explaining it, but balance to me is it's an inactive word. So balance is just like a static position in time, where tension to me implies work and it implies focus and it implies that just that actionable moment, which is what you're saying with the marriage analogy.
I think you're describing it really well. I totally am picking up what you're putting down with that.
And I think I appreciate that. Sometimes my words get away from me, but I love you for following along with me.
It up. You're good.
But I do think you bring up a good point, right? And it's understanding that things don't always look the same. And I know the way you and I schedule is very different. And I have blocks of time for different activities. And like full disclosure, my calendar's color coordinated. So I know like a block of time if I'm supposed to be dressed for camera, or if it's a phone call, or if I have to be driving somewhere, because these are things that help me manage my anxiety, full disclosure. And they're things that help me understand where I can put pockets of time for self-care, for that walk, for that, meal planning or meal prepping. So I think it's funny. You and I joke a lot about how different we are, but if you get to the root of why we do the things we do, it's very much the same. It's just executed differently.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
We like to joke that we're different people, but I don't think we're that different.
We are very different, and we're not at the same time.
Yes,
I mean,
true.
it's quite funny, really. Your planner gives me a lot of anxiety.
I love my planner. It sits next to me all day long. Anywho, back to the topic of discussion, creating the space to have both, to have the balance, to have the tension, to have the work success and that need met of being productive and feeling like you've done something in a day, and also allowing room for your creativity and room for what I like to call scheduling snafus, where something that is pre-planned goes like 100% off the rails.
Yes, a contingency plan. Sorry. Well, that's like the emergency preparedness planner and me coming out, because you always want to have a contingency budget. You want to have a contingency plan. So that was definitely something like we would look at in that role. So I definitely agree with you. But I think another humongous piece of this conversation is the fact that our productivity is oftentimes equated to our self-worth. Like we associate our productivity to equal success, and therefore that's how we identify our self-worth. So I think whenever we're talking about why don't we see more of a work-life balance in the US culture, I think it's because there's also a lot of societal expectations around how we view success and how that does directly correlate with our productivity numbers and therefore our quality or worthiness as a person.
Well, yes. And I think part of that is that we're measuring not necessarily the wrong things on the productivity scale, but we're not measuring all the right things. Like for me,
well stated.
I thank you. I make lists and I love lists. I love being able to check things off because it makes me feel like
it is satisfying.
It's very satisfying. I'll even go back and add things to the list that I did that weren't previously on, just so I can check it off, because that makes me happy. Okay. I know I have problems, but I'm not the only one.
No, you're not. I've totally done that before.
I think what we're not doing is putting the things on that checklist that bring joy and spark joy. I will put on my list, go for a walk. And when I go for that walk, I do a little celebratory dance, because I can tell you for the first 8 months of the pandemic, I didn't leave my office. And they were long days. They were dark days because I would forget to open the blinds. I would just sit up here and work like sun up to sundown. Because my world shifted, and I was like,
same kind of thing. Then you had a little bit of the workaholism hit you too. I mean, it was
I had no idea what to do, because I didn't have a commute in the morning or the afternoon. My kids were home 24/7 because there was no school, and we were homeschooling. So my days were just like this weird
Groundhog's Day, just over and over.
100% Groundhog's Day. Now, there was a lot of joy in that I got to spend time with my kids that I wouldn't. And over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to have lunch with my kids at least 4 days a week, which has brought me so much joy. But at the same time, I lost myself in work and in momming because I didn't know how to break the transitions in.
I was going to say, how could you not, though? I think that's such a that's a whole separate topic that we should totally talk about in another episode, because that is, you are preaching to like so many parents out there can relate to that 100%.
Well, it's like it happened and I didn't even realize it. And suddenly I quote unquote woke up one day and I was like, wait, when's the last time I went outside? Like, when's the last time I saw the sun? When's the last time because I wasn't driving anywhere.
Sure.
I didn't need to go anywhere outside of my home. And it was just this realization of, well, shit, like we got to right this ship. I'm going the wrong direction. Yeah. Hold on, hold the phone. And I think I called Eric and I was like, I'm taking a mental health day. I don't know what's going on. I need to like sit for a minute and just figure out what is happening in my life. And not much changed for him with pandemic living. I think the lab was closed for like 3 weeks and then they were back on a normal schedule. But for me,
that would make sense.
Yeah, because I mean,
for his line of work,
it's a required, yes.
Yeah.
But for me, everything shifted, and I was like, I'm taking a mental health day. I'm putting my phone on do not disturb. Like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm at home. I need a minute. And he was like, okay, like, call me if you need something, but feel your feels, like, do your thing. I got you. And it was that moment of realizing I've lost any aspect of my life that was a passion project for me. Like, I think he called it out. I was vision boarding one day and he's like, when's the last time you did a scrapbook? And scrapbooks used to be like a huge part of my world.
Really?
And I was like, I have no idea.
Well,
like,
sure. You haven't had any place to go, no people to see. You've been stuck in your house for 8 months. There isn't shit to scrapbook.
Right? Right.
There's not too many memories.
I was just the thought has not occurred to me. And like, I love you, but that thought has never occurred to me in the last 2 years that I've not scrapbooked. But what it said to me was like, he was recognizing I wasn't doing anything for me. I wasn't like any of my creative outlets. I wasn't doing any of those. And I think so many of us fell into that trap. And a lot of folks are still there.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I feel like people have swung on different sides of that pendulum because some people, to your point, it created this space where there was no sense of balance whatsoever, where you're just constantly on call, constantly working or sending the emails at 2 a.m. when you wake up at night. And then on the other hand, there's people that either were laid off or, just on unemployment unexpectedly, or maybe their hours were a hell of a lot different now that they were working from home because there was very little they could do from home versus the office, where it actually opened up a ton of free time for people to like learn new hobbies and do new things to help them kind of sustain during that period. So it is interesting to hear both perspectives in that sense too.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder that we can all go through the same shared experience and it impacts us all differently.
Oh,
right? We react differently. Which there's a lot of reasons behind all that. And there's a lot of, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, that without diving into all of the psych aspect of it, but yes, many protective factors and risk factors that absolutely play into that, and whether or not we have the presence of social supports and or access to coping skills. Those are
lots of different trauma responses, friend. And some of us, me, I'm like, who needs me? Somebody needs help. That's my trauma response. I'm like, I can just stick my stuff right under the couch and focus on what somebody else needs. Cause like
that's the fawn response, my love, the fawn response.
Yes. I'm like, I'm fine. I am most of the time, but sometimes I'm not because I'm a human.
She says this while shaking her head no halfway.
Well, and it's funny. So I think you and I've talked about this before, but I use I'm fine, it's fine, everything's fine as it's a sense of humor piece for me. Yes, I am in no way saying that I am fine. That is usually when I'm like, okay, shit's hitting the fan. Everything's in chaos. We're going to figure it out. I just need a minute. And that's like my natural defense mechanism. There's like, I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. But every time I say it, my head is shaking no, because I'm like, my body is disagreeing with what my mouth is saying.
Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it, girl.
Oh man, something like that.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is real. That is, yes, full stop on that one. I think we've covered a lot today. I know that like we set out to kind of chat with y'all about the idea in our society that work is work. You can never have fun with work, and you're supposed to work, Monday through Friday or whatever your work week looks like. And then you just quote unquote live for the weekends, and you can only find joy in the time that you're not working. And I hope that after listening to Lindsey and I go down a couple of rabbit holes, y'all see that there is another way of living, and that it is imperative, not just important, imperative for you to build in those pockets of time to prevent breakdown and prevent that burnout that has impacted a lot of our society to some degree. Especially over the last couple of years.
Yes. And create time to do things that fill your cup, create time of whatever. I often encourage clients to reflect on something that brought them joy like 10 years ago, or
Oh,
what did you used to love to do when you were in elementary school or middle school or even high school? Like a random thing that you thought was so cool at that time in your life. Maybe you played basketball in middle school and have not touched a basketball since middle school. Go shoot hoops and see what it's like for you. Like just go do something really random that you have not done. Maybe you haven't scrapbooked since elementary school when you had an art teacher that made you do it. I mean,
yeah.
so just things like that can, it just kind of helps you reconnect with a part of yourself that you might have lost touch with. And there's no harm in exploring, taking one moment of time to just explore what that might feel like for you. And so instead of living to work, work to live
Yeah.
and enjoy it, soak it up. So I'm glad that we talked about this topic because I do think it's very appropriate in the sense that we all need to be able to find that sense of joy and hold on to it and understand that it doesn't all have to be with however you identify in terms of your label or your in terms of your career, what have you.
Absolutely. And my encouragement to you is don't worry about what other people say or think about the activity you're doing. You know, if you're 50 years old and you want to go shoot hoops and somebody says that's stupid, you shouldn't do that, tell them to buzz off because that's ridiculous. I can't. If it brings you joy and harms no one else, then I don't see a problem with it. So let your freak flag fly and go do the dang thing.
Well, we're talking about a freak flag.
That's a whole nother topic. And it's one that I'm excited to bring on this podcast with you.
On that note, we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye, y'all.
And we all sing, everything is gonna be just fine. It's gonna fall into place. The sun is gonna set on your terrible day.